internal magnetic forces.
Classes. Cities in the Renaissance period. In Florence, there were four social classes: nobles, merchants, tradesmen, and unskilled workers. Nobles worked as military officers and politicians, on large estates outside of the city walls, and had control because they owned most of the land. Nobles loathed the merchants very much, and the merchants obtained power and wealth from industries like shipbuilding and wool processing. The merchants preserved their wealth by controlling government and marrying into the noble family. They became great supporters of artists to gain public. The Medici family is one of the popular examples of merchant families. The tradesmen were the craftsmen and workers and shopkeepers. Most tradesmen were part of guilds and organizations that founded standards of quality. Some tradesmen moved up a level and became merchants. Finally, the lowest class, unskilled workers. These workers had no job protection, so they depended entirely on their employers. However, urban workers were much better off than the peasants who lived in rural areas. The sharecroppers, the peasants that worked on nobles' land, were the poorest. Life for them was very difficult, and starvation was often endured. However, as the Renaissance period progressed, the social classes grew less prominent as the humanist ideas led to higher rights for individuals. Each class lived entirely different lives, from the role of women to clothing. Which brings us to our next point.
The change of fashion in the Renaissance era was perceptible. In between the 150 years of the Renaissance, designers were inspired by Renaissance art as well as medieval and Gothic styles of clothing. But people were displayed their social status due to the expensive and extravagant fabric materials. Although originally darker colors symbolized people who were poor, the wealthy people realized that darker colors would be a better choice to swing their jewels. Velvets, cotton, and silk were used to fabricate clothing for wealthy people. Clothing was especially pricey because they were imported from India. Later on in the 15th century, the trend went from simple, natural appearances to a rounder, fuller, and more dramatic style. Men put feathers from hat to knee, and shirts and doublet was also common among. Women were 5 layers of clothing, and it takes a long time to prepare. Use for stuff so that it looks rounder. Children would get dressed according to the style of the family.
Women in the Renaissance. People started observing and arguing that women in the Renaissance, wealthy women at least, started having a little more freedom and enjoyed more power and independence in their lives than women from previous generations. Women didn't have a Renaissance, meaning they didn't have much more freedom, just more rights. Women were known to be weak. Cities usually were male-dominated. Women's job in the Renaissance was to be a wife, a housewife, and a mother. Men were usually allowed to beat women if they misbehaved. In the Renaissance Italy, upper-class women had 2 choices: to get married or to go to college, which was highly unlikely since society denied women of higher education. They were not allowed to go out in the public alone, so they had to stay home. Even churches were anti-women. Fathers forced women to marry at a young age, 11 or 12 years old at least. They needed a dowry to get married. Poor women had hard lives, had to work outside, while upper-class women were not even allowed to go outside. One girl, for example, her name is Isabella d'Este. She comes from a wealthy family, and she was known as the first Renaissance woman. She is very well educated, she ruled the city, and her father believed in equality. She founded a school for young women, and she was one of the first feminists of that time.